about the ball game, I think. Well, we're starting out with a panel on dance. We have two participants, live participants. We have one that will be joining us remotely from Scotland. Actually, I say one, but it's a partnership. It's a team of two that will be participating remotely. It's good that, Maggie McEwen is here on behalf of the Scottish Studies Foundation. Maggie's interest in her Scottish heritage started with Scottish dance. And so she is going to be the moderator of our dance panel. And Maggie, she'll introduce our panelists. Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you, John. I was going to start off giving you a sales pitch about the foundation, but John gave you such a wonderful, glorified piece of information before we had our break. There's really not much more I can tell you, except that we were responsible for funding the start of the Centre for Scottish Studies at the University of Guelph in the History Department. And we deal with other academic Scottish groups, which has nothing whatsoever to do with dancing. However, I am a Scottish country dancer, and in my youth, a long time ago, I was a Highland dancer. So it's my pleasure to be the moderator. How I'm going to handle the long distance thing, we'll have to wait to see. I assumed it was. Doesn't make a difference. Oh, there we are. Thank you. I'll introduce them again. Scott Gilmore and Claire McKenzie from Noisemakers, based in Glasgow. Welcome. I've never done this long distance before, so help me out. And sitting next to me is Laurie Patterson, who is the Scottish country dancer and a teacher here in Detroit. And we've been talking, we have a couple of friends in common, which is lovely. And at the end is Kate McGood, Highland dancer. You have her resume in front of you, which is really too long for me to read at the moment. But wonderful prizes and fabulous. So I'm going to ask each panel member to speak a little bit, maybe ask them some questions, and then open it up to questions from the hall. So, Kate will start. Yes.
Hello? Yeah, there we go. Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. My name's Kate DeGood, now Kate Cassidy, married, and I teach the Highland dancers here at the St. Andrews Society. I've really made Highland dance my life passion. I got started when I was about 7 years old, and we happened to move to Elma, Michigan, which is Scotland, USA. They have the big games there. And I actually did all sorts of dance growing up, but there was something about Scottish Highland dance in particular that I just loved it, and I happened to be good at it, and it has brought a lot of really wonderful things into my life. I had the opportunity to travel with it. From the time I was 13 on, we started going to the World Highland Dance Championships in Scotland in Dunoon, and I did that annually, really through last year was the last year I took dancers over for the first time. So I competed and I learned a lot about Scottish culture. I don't think I would have become passionate about Scottish culture otherwise. It's a small part of my lineage, but I really don't have information about it. but now Scotland is really a second home to me. I mean, when I'm over in Scotland, there are places that absolutely feel like home. And I've made some of my best friends, lifelong friends, as dancers, competitors when I was young. Actually, my very best friend is an interesting story because U.S. championships, they tied us for second and third place, and they ended up breaking the tie incorrectly, and they awarded it to her, and then they discovered their mistake and then re-awarded it to me. So as 12-year-olds, like, that should have put us in the position of enemies or and we ended up being the very, very best of friends, so, and still are today. She actually came here and taught a workshop last year. So I started teaching when I was 16, took my exams, and then I also took my judge's exam when I was 21. So now that's become part of, I'm always looking to kind of continue growing and innovating Highland dancing. I think we need to bring it really into the 21st century, and there are some ways that we are doing that better than we used to, and some ways that there are a lot of areas for growth. So, for example, there's a dance teacher friend who runs a business solutions group, and we had a social media forum. And just in the past few weeks, that's something I've really worked on, is my social media presence. And like one video in particular that I posted ended up having 5,000 views. And my husband was funny. He's like, "Is that every Highland dancer in the world then that looked at that?" I'm like, well, pretty close to it. So I just think there's some really interesting ways. I hope to talk a little bit more about how to really connect Highland dancing to societies like the St. Andrews Society, and how to like greater connect the families and to bring in everyone and promote everyone that way. Because I really think the Scottish arts, Highland dancing, Scottish country dancing, piping, drumming, those are the ways you really keep the families come in, keeping the young kids coming in and getting everyone involved. And as you know, this is a family affair, right? A lot of the families that are involved with dance or involved with Scottish culture, the whole family is, and it continues through the generations. And so, for example, some of the dancers that come in, I hope that I could get their parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles involved with the society. So I think there are better ways to make connections like that, although I'm not exactly sure what those are, but I hope we can continue to explore that. So I don't want to talk forever. I'll pass this on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. So I became involved in Scottish country dancing by attending a Burns dinner at a friend's church, and thought, oh, that looks really cool, and joined that. I do not have Scottish heritage, or at least not that I'm aware of, but I met my husband through Scottish country dancing. So sometimes at demonstrations, including at the St. Andrews Games, I will say becoming a Scottish country dancer can be a life-changing experience. So, but he had come to Scottish dancing as a son of both parents had been born in Scotland. His dad emigrated at a very young age. His mom was a war bride, came back with his dad. So they were part of that wave of immigration, I think from the 40s, 50s, 60s, even maybe into the 70s. But he grew up in the Detroit Scottish culture, going to St. Andrews Hall downtown, going to the St. Andrews Games at Boblo Island, going to the Bluebell Club, going to Scotty Simpson's Fish and Chips, going to the White Heather Club for many, many years. And we're seeing fewer and fewer. I think really the St. Andrews, the Kilgore Center is one of the few dedicated Scottish clubs left in this community. So it's very interesting to see how, as this is aging, the population is aging, and the attempts to engage the next generation are really something that's on everyone's minds, every group that I belong to. I'm also involved with the Detroit Burns Club. And, oh, by the way, I have flyers for our Burns dinner in January. But anyway, in Scottish country dancing, it's a very old tradition. We dance dances that were done in the 1700s. We dance dances that were done last year. And I also sometimes at demonstrations say, I'm absolutely convinced somebody right now in the world is writing a Scottish country dance. So it's a very living tradition, but still based in very old styles or very old techniques. So, and as I was talking with Maggie earlier, it is not something that you can just pick up on a night. And I think it's same thing with Highland dancing. Maybe that's all of the Scottish things. You can't play a bagpipe in a single session either. So it requires some dedication, some mental energy, some physical energy, and some understanding. As Kate said about going to Scotland to learning things, there are lots of dances where I learned parts of Scottish history because of the names of the dances. Like 1314 is a dance that we do. Nottingham lace. Oh, okay, then you can talk about the Nottingham lace makers. Or the Turngate. That's a place in Glasgow, I think. So, or Trongate. Anyway, it's been a way to know about a lot of different things that I wouldn't necessarily have been exposed to. And again, a whole network of people. We have people that went to Paris just the last couple of weeks and danced twice with the group in Paris. There are people in our group that went to Japan and danced with people in Japan, in Venice, in New Zealand, in Australia. So that network of a community that you can connect to on a worldwide basis is really something extraordinary. And in Glasgow, I've been to the Riverside Ceilidh Club, which I'm not sure is still in operation, but I have their CD, and so when I'm teaching people how to do the Gay Gordons, the narrator from the Glasgow Riverside Ceilidh band is in the back of my head saying, 3 steps forward, turn around, 4 steps back, and that's just always in my head as we go. So it's always been a very rewarding thing for me. The other challenge we have, along with the aging and all that, it's more physically demanding. And as you become older and having danced many years in church basements on tile over cement floors, it gets to be a little punishing as well. Maggie probably knows about that too. So that's kind of my story on Scottish country dancing and the heritage and the traditions.
Thank you, Laura. Now let's hear from, am I on?
Yeah.
Okay. Can we hear from the noisemakers now, please? Tell us about yourselves and what you do.
Can you hear us? Hello, hello.
Can you hear us both?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Excellent. If at any point you can't hear us, just start waving your arms frantically and we'll stop talking. So my name is Scott Gilmore.
And I'm Claire Mackenzie, and together we are not dancers, but we are a musical theatre writing partnership. So I'm a composer, and Scott is a writer and lyricist. And we've worked together for about 7 years. I should say I'm talking from Glasgow today, and Scott is actually in Edinburgh. So we're usually together, but today we're in separate cities. But we've started writing about 7 years ago, and we've written a variety of musicals, lots of different styles in there, and they've been performed in lots of different places. What usually happens is we develop our show in Scotland, and then we come over to the States, luckily, to work with different theatres over there to develop the project further. We think, though, like regardless of the story, that our like Scottish roots and our musical style still is always in every bit of music we write. And it has a Celtic feel, and I think that's very much inspired by the place that we're living and working in.
So Claire and I, we both are graduates of the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. We met there as students, and we formed Noisemaker, our company, in 2012. And I think we just wanted to talk a little bit about the Scottish theatre that we grew up watching over here, and how dance and movement is such a kind of an important part of that. There was one particular piece that we watched while we were students, a piece called Black Watch that some of you might have heard of. It was by the National Theatre of Scotland, and it detailed the history of the Black Watch Regiment in the Scottish Army. And this piece kind of looked at a bunch of guys, and they were out in Iraq serving on a tour. And there was one particular section within that talked about the history of the regiment, went right from where it started in 1881 right through to present day. And the whole section was told on stage using movement and dance and music as a way to communicate story. And I guess for the two of us, for Claire and I, seeing that on stage has been a massive informant of how we make work and how we make theatre and how we use music and song and also dance in order to push a story into to tell and connect an audience to the particular story we're trying to tell.
And a lot of Scottish theatre is quite has a lot of physical movement in it, and it might not be the traditional sense. We have amazing movement companies like Frantic Assembly, and lots of amazing movement directors that and they don't typically take traditional dance, but they'll transform. For example, in Blackwatch, wasn't it taking the steps from like an army drill? And then turning that into choreography, which is why it's so memorable, I think.
We as a company, we try to use tradition, like Claire said earlier. Our heritage and our tradition informs a lot of the work that we do. And there's a piece in particular that we are in the moment developing at the moment that it focuses around ceilidh dancing, like we were talking about earlier on. And there's a particular show that we're developing over in Scotland at the moment that's coming over to the States that focuses around a ceilidh, that involves the audience arriving for a ceilidh. And as they start dancing, they realise, oh, wait, I'm dancing with an actor or an opera singer, and a story starts to kind of evolve out of that interaction. And the whole evening is basically a ceilidh dance that then turns into a piece of theatre. I think for us, we were first commissioned to write a short opera about a ceilidh. That's kind of where this idea came from, and it took place in this pub, a place called Sloan's, which is in Trongate, which was mentioned earlier on. If you're ever in Glasgow, you should definitely have a pint at that pub. The piece got made there originally, and now it's being developed into a slightly bigger thing. And for us, it's been quite interesting as kind of younger writers to see the resurgence of ceilidh dancing, and the connection to that tradition, to that heritage, is something that people are hungry for and want to explore and connect to, particularly through the medium that we both work in, which is musical theatre. Using that movement and using that visual storytelling as a way to communicate to people is quite evocative, and is something that we're both quite passionate about and that we're exploring at the moment, which is why it's a total pleasure to be with you all today to talk about this particular subject.
Well, thank you. I was saying to a few people that I grew up in the northwest coast of England, Scottish parents, but was born in England. And in primary school, we certainly, in our physical education classes, got dancing as part of the curriculum. I don't know if it's still going on up in Scotland. I know Gus said in his day it was still happening. It is it? That's really great.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe this is something we should be doing here. I'm not American, so I can't really say anything. But maybe we should try it in Canada. I know we did, but I don't think it's lasted.
We're working with the St. Andrews group now. I don't know if any of you in here, I've only been once, but there's a crowd that's coming for Scottish country dance. Is it on? All right, thanks. There's a group that's coming for Scottish country dance here on several Mondays since August, and I plan to come at least once or twice to do ceilidh dances because that's a particular interest in there. And it's not much of a jump from ceilidh dancing to Scottish country, and it's all part of the same tradition. And what's always appealed to me about Scottish country dancing is it is not solo dancing, nothing against the Highland dancers, but you are dancing with 6 to 8 or 6 to 7 other people, depending on the size of your set. And it's really about your participation in creating this experience for everybody. It truly is a social dancing, and that's one of the things that's always appealed to me.
John Cherry, and I thought might take the first question. We've exchanged emails a couple of times, and I know that we discussed Noisemaker wasn't quite the right wasn't an exact fit for a dance panel because your art form is much broader than that. But I understand that you're going to. We are in the Midwest, but you are going to be doing some work at Northwestern University shortly. Could you tell people about what you're going to be doing there? Because that's not all that far for a number of people here. If you're going to be doing some, perhaps they may want to experience your work firsthand.
Yes, well, we started working with Northwestern University last year on a different piece that we took to the Edinburgh Fringe, and we got to visit the university last year, and it's a wonderful place, and they kindly asked us back to come and be part of a residency there. So yeah, next spring we're both going to be over in Evanston for 6 weeks developing a new show of ours, which is not Kaylee, a different one called The Girl Who, which we're going to be working with the students on. And I think that the presentations of that are happening in March. I think I'm right, Scott, of that show.
Right. You got the dates right. I think we'll be working with Northwestern to basically develop this show into a fuller production, and we'll be doing some presentations of it, as Claire said, around March time. But what we could definitely do is we connect like some links and stuff to that through you, John, and we could pass that on if anyone is in Evanston and wants to come and help some lost Scottish people find their way around, then we'd be very happy to see any of you.
Thank you.
Bob Giles asking you a question here. I'm intrigued by what I thought you said was that you've developed, that as noisemakers developed an opera based on a ceilidh. Now, knowing what I know about opera, does somebody die at this ceilidh?
No one died. No.
That's the cardinal rule of opera broken. Everyone lives. Everyone lives. The piece basically follows the story of, it's sort of a few different couples that are meeting at lots of different timelines. So there's a couple that meet in sort of old traditional Scotland, sort of 16th century. There's a couple that meet in present day, and they're all meeting at a ceilidh. And none of them die, which is positive. But there are broken relationships. There are relationships that last a lifetime, and there are some that only last for that particular night. And I think we were drawn to the ceilidh idea because you are forced to have a connection with someone in that moment. You're forced to make a physical connection to somebody, and it's sort of unlike anything else. It's unlike any other kind of social gathering. So that's, I guess, where the idea came from. And we tried it out as an opera in Glasgow, and we're developing it a bit further now. But as it's growing as a piece, we might kill off some of the characters as a result of this conference. So I will.
You've been very modest about what, and I'm going to blow your horn a little bit, because you beat out 900 other applications to come to New York and be the featured musical within the New York Musical Theatre 3 years ago with Forest Boy. And they were the only British work there and the only Scottish one. So that's the first blow your horn at you. And then also that you've got all these awards you've been winning. So I just think that they're a fantastic example of the creative youth that's going on in Scotland. And thank you for being with us. And I'm so glad that you're going to be at Northwestern, that you're doing something with the Dundee rep over in Connecticut, aren't you? And, you know, they're really active over here. So I hope that we can think of ways that they can be helping us, because your interpretation is different from the scenery to how you move everything around. And this can only help us as we're talking about the heritage and the transfer to the next generation.
Hi guys, Rory Heatherley from the Scottish Government. obviously it's the Year of Young People, and I'm sure that you've done a lot of stuff domestically. The panel here was discussing ceilidh dancing in schools. I would just be interested to hear from you guys how you find at grassroots level you're able to promote what you do and make it cool and trendy. Obviously, you guys are quite young. You're going to be taking this to the next generation. How do you sell it to them when maybe they don't want to play sport, for example, and they want to get into the arts?
I think that's an amazing question, and it's one that we sort of have to approach differently depending on the piece that we're trying to make. I think a huge part of what we kind of do as a partnership is having a look and sort of trying to immerse ourselves a little bit in what is like cool at the moment, trying to get a bit of a sense of that, and then trying to see if there's a way to filter that into the work and into the writing. When it comes to stuff like it's interesting, like using dance as a kind of way in, looking at ceilidh dancing. It's had a sort of odd, massive resurgence in Scotland. It's pretty cool to have a ceilidh dance at for a birthday party or whatever, and actually young people are enjoying that as a way to connect to one another. That's kind of how we ended up coming to the idea of doing the opera in the first place. But I do think more generally, when you're talking about trying to bring young people and connecting them to the heritage of the place that they're from, I know for me personally, it is about offering an identity, I think, a little bit to young people that perhaps sometimes feel that they are lacking that voice, and rather than it being something that's sort of handed down and kind of, it feels like they're taking tradition, actually allowing it to feel a bit more accessible and making it feel like kind of what we were saying earlier on about new dances being created and all that stuff, allowing them to have a voice has been, I guess, quite useful for us in terms of when we go to work with young people, or when we're doing a piece that is targeted at families and children and stuff like that. I guess it's kind of looking at what culture are they getting exposed to each day, and how does that filter in more directly into some of this tradition and heritage that we kind of want to keep alive within our work, I guess. Claire, I've been talking quite a lot. Can you say something?
The only thing I wanted to add to that is that we mentioned Sloane's earlier, which is the oldest pub in Glasgow, and they run a ceilidh night once a week, and I went to a couple of those, and it's all young people. It's all younger than me, 18 to 20, 25-year-olds, and they love it, and they go every Friday. So there's people out there, there's young people who want to get involved with this. We've now been working with the Royal Scottish Country Dance Society over here in Glasgow, to see how they run things and see how they teach classes, just to help impact ceilidh, the piece we're working on. And I know that they are still trying to make that leap from getting young people who are quite happy to go to a ceilidh, but not necessarily taking the first step to go to a class, a Scottish country dancing class, and they're trying to bridge that gap. And I think that's the challenge, as far as I'm aware, that they have at the moment. But there's certainly young people wanting to dance and wanting to get involved.
That's great to hear. Just one final point from me. For the benefit of you guys in Scotland, I represent the Scottish Government in the US. I'm going to ask Camilla to hook us up offline, because I'd love to work with you guys when you're doing all your stuff out here. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, we'd love to meet you.
It's nice to talk to you now.
Do you ever come to Canada?
Do we ever come to Canada? Did someone... Was that the question? Sorry.
That was the question.
Very possibly we might be. At some point, sort of towards next year, we're kind of having a bit of a conversation with some people in Toronto about maybe working together. But I think that the nice part about that we've certainly found, even just working in the States a little bit more, is the appetite and support for Scottish work and stories and folk and heritage that we are, so naturally sort of exposed to. There is a real sort of desire for that, and so it's been quite nice actually to be so welcomed in and for our work to be so welcomed has been a lovely thing over the last couple of years. We feel very grateful for that, and yeah, we'd love to go to Canada.
Yeah, well, I have to find out when and do my best to promote you. I think it would work very well. We're a different group of people. Most of us are newer North Americans, so I think we probably travel back to Scotland more frequently than most of the people from this country. But we still need youth getting involved, and you would be great. So I will ask Camilla too.
This is Bart Forbes. I actually live in the D.C. area. You mentioned you work with young performers. Do you work at all with Jazz Art UK?
Oh, no, not worked with them as of yet, no.
Jared and Nicole.
Yeah, I've heard of the name before, but we've not come into contact with them yet.
They have a wonderful school, and she's a friend of mine. So I think it'd be a great match because she does do a lot of teaching of dance music, and that might be a great showplace for you to work with in Edinburgh. So I'll connect with you later and maybe introduce you virtually with Sheridan and Nicole.
Amazing. That would be wonderful.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
So when you're going to be in Evanston next year, do you have flexibility in your schedule so that, Chicago's not that far from Detroit. If there was an opportunity to maybe have you be here in person rather than virtually, I don't know if there's some interest maybe here, but I guess the first question is, do you have flexibility on your visit?
Yes, we do, and we're really excited. We want to travel and we want to see places, so we would absolutely love to come and visit. Yeah, please keep in touch if there's anything in mind. But I think we're out there from the start of February until the end of March, so those 2 months. But yes, we have time to move around and want to. Yeah.
Particularly within the bulk of February and March, we're sort of leading mainly sort of workshops with students and kind of young people in Chicago, sort of looking at our work and looking at how we sort of develop new theatre in Scotland and how that might work over here. Then towards the end of our residency is when we start to sort of work a bit more directly on a specific show. But there's definitely flexibility, and neither of us have been to Detroit. We'd love to.
Question here. I've only been with Scottish organizations for 3 years now, and just now I'm hearing that there's sort of a third form of dancing. I've heard Cayley dance, Highland dancing, and just Scottish country dancing. Are those three different kinds? I mean, I've seen the Highland dancing in competition at many Highland games I've been to, but now I hear there's Scottish country dancing, which might be a different art form, and Cayley, which might even be more casual. Is that somewhat appropriate?
Yeah, so all three are connected, really. There are similar steps that we share. I'll speak to Highland dancing first, I guess, is a more competitive form and less social, I guess. Although I would argue that kids love to come to dance class to see all their friends, and we have dances where you interact with others, but it's a very, very technical form of dance and mainly competitive. So we travel to different competitions and Highland games, and that's one thing that's so wonderful about over in Scotland. Nearly every competition's associated with the Highland Games, and over the summer you can go to a Highland Games almost any day of the week in the month of August. We have fewer over here and we have to travel more for them, but they're still wonderful because it's really a community gathering, right? Like everyone coming together to socialize, compete. So Highland dancing, anyways, getting back to the point, is you compete individually. And it's very there's no room for interpretation. Every position is in a position. You're working on the same, going back to the tradition, the same 4 dances primarily your whole life, just working to perfect them. There's more steps, but generally it's something that people take up younger in life. I have students I start at 2 years old now, so that's been my new thing this summer, is to get the mommy and me 2 and 3 year olds in. And I mean, I think that kind of talking about appealing to young people today, I think people are looking for some of these really traditional elements that we have. Like, honestly, both the girls and boys, I do a fun little sword jump with them because we dance over swords. They absolutely love that. Not all the little girls want to be princesses and tutus. They like that there's tradition behind it. There's a story behind each one of our dances, and elements that go back to even BC times. And then with the competitive element, I actually think that's something that parents are looking for, especially maybe over here in the US. We've become this very, everyone gets a trophy for everything they're in and everyone wins first place. And we're really not that way. Even the 4-year-olds go to competitions. Some of them will win medals and some of them won't. And but it's all very character building, and they learn that they have to work hard and, like you said, be very committed. You're not going to be an expert on day one. It takes months and years to work on perfecting that. But then when you do win those prizes, it means so much more because so much hard work went behind it. So anyways, I'll pass it on to you.
I have 2 nieces that did Highland dancing, and now a great niece and nephew that do Highland dancing. So I think the other social aspect is when you're watching competition and you've got to watch through many, many cycles of the thing, you're sitting in the audience with other dance families. So that's another way that you're connecting there. But in terms of the Ceilidh versus the Scottish country, I think your characterization, the Ceilidh is a little more casual. You can use the elements. Scottish country dancing, if it's done perfectly, there are competitions, but that's not really the focus. It's mostly I think the weekly gatherings, and then tea dances, socials, balls. We do balls. You can put your party dress on and come and put your dance shoes on and have a great time. But it is a little more formal in terms of some of the technique in the country dancing, but still very accessible. And it really depends on the group. There's a couple of things that we say. Everybody screws up a Scottish country dance. It is a set pattern that everyone does it, but everyone, no matter how many years you've been dancing, and Maggie will attest to this as well, you're going to screw up a dance now and then. So we just say, keep smiling, keep moving. It's supposed to be fun. That's what you're really there for. It's social dancing. Even at the Scottish country dancing, it's technical, but it's social dancing primarily. So
I would like to say that the Scottish country dancing is based on the traditional dances of the French court. So we go through ballet positions with our feet and point our toes. Ceilidh dancing, you don't do that. You can do Ceilidh dancing in tackety boots, and it's just fun. So thank you very much for that question.
Other questions? So, Laurel, so your answer all of a sudden popped the question into my mind. I mean, if it's to smile and keep going, then what is the purpose of the dance?
It is part of the tradition, and when it's done, if you get to a level when it's done well, it's beautiful. I mean, there's an elegance to it that, Meg and I were talking, you can go and do line dancing in a night, and it's the same. I'm sorry, I've done it a couple times. It's not particularly my favorite because it's the same thing over and over again. In a Scottish country dance, you have a series of figures, and you would know this from the Ceilidh dances as well, that it's not the same thing. You may repeat it from different positions, but you're with different people, but it's a mixture of formations, it's a mixture of steps, it's a technique as well as interactions with others. So I think you have to be really smart to be a Scottish country dancer. I'm just, it's not, no brag, but anyways, but it does take a little bit more, but it's also a very old tradition, as Maggie was saying. It's French court dances, it's ballet positions. To do it perfectly, you can do it, but you can do it less perfectly and still have a wonderful time.
I'm working through this in my head, and I'm trying to speculate, and that's, knowledge. A little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing, as they say, and so I could be way off. So I'm sitting there saying, well, first of all, if it was part of a French court dance, it is a social piece. I mean, it was intended to be what was done in a social occasion. But because you're talking about it having specific moves and being intricate, it's almost like I don't want to say recreation, but it's an art form. In other words, you derive pleasure from performing it correctly. So it's a pastime in some respects.
Yeah, you can get pleasure performing it incorrectly too, but that keeps on and keep moving.
Right.
But if I could tell you a dance sequence, and if you knew these figures, like if I say it was right hands across and left hands back, down the middle and up, circle and I don't know, poussette at the end. If somebody was an experienced dancer, they could do that dance because those figures are the same. And when I talked about people traveling, if you do a dance here, you're going to do that same dance in Prague or Paris or South Africa or whatever. It's a wonderful worldwide. Although Maggie and I were talking too, when I first started dancing in the 80s, there were 30-some thousand members of the Royal Scottish Country Dance Society, and the last report that I saw was 11,000 something. So we're actively trying. We're always like people. We're very, and people come and they think, oh, I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to screw it up. Hey, we all did, and we all do. So it's really about, are you having fun?
And in the end, it's a art form that was developed when there weren't 10,000 other competitive things you could do. Yeah. There were limited choices.
Hi, this is Bart again. I just wanted to share with you my experience. I went to the Burns Night of the alumni of the universities in Scotland, in the Washington, D.C. area. And of course, the St. Andrews Society of Washington, D.C. always has our ball, and we have ballroom dancing. Oh my gosh, these kids, they pushed aside the table. We had a Kaylee going on. I don't know nothing about no Kaylee dancing. And after a few whiskeys, I was having a blast. I made some really good friends there. And here's a lesson that I learned. If y'all want to get younger people to your events, y'all get your dancing shoes on and don't worry about messing up. It's an awesome time. I endorse it entirely. I'm trying to get the Stagio Society to get more Kaylee dancing in. But even though we have one of the oldest societies in the country, we also have the youngest membership. And so I think we're slowly getting there. Kaylee dancing, awesome. That gets the young people in.
Now, I should say that Ian Hunter has, some time ago, under the auspices of the Detroit St. Andrews Society, Kate Good did a video that went through all of the different Highland dance steps. And Ian has a video of all of those. So I'm assuming he's trying to sell those right now. But so there is so that's one of the things we have done as a society, is try to help educate people as to what at least the Highland dance was, and Kate helped us do that through the production of that video. Other questions? Yes.
You were talking about electronic resources. The Royal Scottish Country Dance Society, rscds.org, from Edinburgh website. There's also a wonderful website called the Scottish Country Dance Dictionary, and it has both Kaylee dances and Scottish country dances. There's a list. You click on the side. There's a list of dances. There's thousands of dances, thousands, and I'm telling you, somebody's writing one right now. But if you want to look at a Kaylee dance and see how to do a Kaylee dance, at least so you all kind of moving in the same general direction. It's a great thing because they've posted videos, and if you go on YouTube and put in Scottish country dancing, you can find lots and lots of YouTubes. Some people are doing it better than others, and if you watch enough, you'll kind of figure out which groups those are. But there are some that are totally phenomenal dancers with, beautiful footwork and graceful covering and, wonderful technique and all that stuff. But if you look at them, I'm hoping in most of them people are smiling because it's supposed to be fun.
Are there other questions? Well, if not, we should thank all of our participants on the panel, noisemakers, and our panel here in the St. Andrew Society. Thank you very much. We are going to take a break.